William Shatner has recently said that he would like to return to a future Star Trek project with the help of AI. Maybe the last thing Star Trek needs to do right now is another nostalgia outing. The franchise needs to look forward, as it was intended. This is a review of Champions, and I'm your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest Champions cigar I suffer. Let me introduce them to you. First up, on camera, the original Mr. Taylor First. How are you?
Timba with his arms wide open.
Next up, showing his beautiful face on camera as well, Merv. How are you?
So, Kath?
And voice only, you already heard him laughing. We have Mr. Lord Deathman. How are you?
I think Merv meant SoCat, his eyes uncovered.
SoCat, his eyes uncovered. This is episode 15 of the Star Trek Project, where we will be reviewing Star Trek. All of it in order of release, kinda. And today we are at Star Trek The Next Generation Season 5. But before we dive into our discussion, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you really can't get enough of us, join our ranks. Go to Sakar at sakar.freeforms.net. Set up that account, get to know us, and yes, join us in our shows if you want to. We would love it if you do that. As mentioned before, we will be discussing the 25 episodes of Season 5 of Star Trek The Next Generation today. But first, we have some unfinished business from Season 4. We need to talk about Redemption, Part 1, the last episode of Season 4, and Part 2, the first episode of Season 5. We need to talk about Redemption because it deals with Klingons. And as we all know, our newbie, Merv, loves Klingons. So I give the floor to you. What are your thoughts on Redemption?
Yeah, well, as previously stated, I do enjoy Klingons. I thought this was an excellent two-parter. I thought maybe not. It's hard for me to differentiate because I watched them back to back anyway, so I didn't have to wait however long the people who watched it in real time had to wait between seasons 3 and 4, or 4 and 5. I'm sorry. So I got to watch them as two-parters, but really one long-parter. But I thought it was great. All the surface level stuff, the ship to ship combat, the obviously the acting and the storytelling and all that stuff. All that stuff was really good. But I think the part that really stuck out the more I thought about it was that this is really just Worf's turmoil here. Like, this is so much about his own self discovery or self view. He feels a calling. Basically, I love how he gets roped in here. Obviously, his family's honor means a lot to him. I love that his brother came back into the mix. I love that Gowron came back into the mix, and I really love anytime we get to see all the Klingons at work. But whenever he leaves Starfleet at the end of Part 1, it's like a big deal. Obviously I didn't expect him to stay gone for long, but I was like, how's he going to come back? Like, he seems really committed to this. And I thought maybe everyone would die or something. But whenever he leaves, like, he is full committed to getting his family's honor back. And I just love that journey for him. But then I love even more that, like, in Part 2 especially, there's all these little scenes where he is not, the Klingon way isn't necessarily for him. He has a version of the Klingon way that is his own, that is intermixed with, like, the human way and the Federation way, but it is not the Klingon way. He feels uncomfortable in these heavy Klingon environments, it seems. So I just really thought that journey that he goes on, where he kind of finds himself along the way while getting his family's honor back. I mean, there's so many points to highlight for Worf's character's journey here that I thought these two episodes were great.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Taylor, can you say it better?
Yeah, I agree completely. There's just so many good things to say about this two-parter. There's a Klingon civil war that is at least partially caused by the Romulans and their dealings. Worf's family gets their honor back. Gowron becomes leader of the Klingon Empire. And Tasha Yar's daughter from an alternate timeline shows up in a Romulan uniform. So, I mean, there's just nothing but good stuff in this episode.
Well, and there's, of course, Lursa and Betor.
Yes, exactly.
Lord Deathman, your thoughts on Redemption?
Before I dive into Redemption, I just have to say that this season is really the one where it solidified my fandom with Star Trek, so I remember it really fondly. This is the season that made me say, I'm a Trekker, for better or worse, and I'm going to have to suffer that embarrassment when I say it in public to people. And if I close my eyes, I can really, really visualize viscerally how much this two-parter affected me. I, like a lot of old people, had to wait that entire summer to get to part two. And man, it was a real nail biter. This two-parter does so much for world building in Star Trek, not just for the Klingon parts of the drama. It introduces us to some incredible, beloved characters, not necessarily introducing us to Gowron, but really going deeper into that character from his earlier kind of cameo appearances. Uh, we get to meet the Duras sisters. We get to meet the illegitimate son of Duras himself, Toral. Picard takes on this new role of the arbiter of secession, getting in the middle of Klingon politics in a way that was just so dynamic, and I'd never really seen it in the franchise. You're like, how is this frail looking, balding, middle aged guy going to kind of intervene in all of these like tough guy type Klingon politics that are going on here? But Patrick Stewart steps up to the podium, to the table, with a total layup. It was a 3-pointer for him. They put a cape on the guy for crying out loud. I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah, but I really fell in love with it. And as Taylor points out, we did get the return of Tasha Yar in the form of her own descendant from another timeline, Sela. A great character, which I think Denise Crosby really leaned into with a little bit of camp, just a little bit of intrigue. She really wanted to create a different character than Tasha Yar, and I think she did an incredibly great job. But the underlying drama of it there, the Klingon Civil War, going deeper into Klingon politics, the power struggle between Gowron and his rival with the Duras House. This is really dramatic stuff. It could even rise to melodrama. It's just so engaging. And the way it plays out between the two parters, the two parts of the story, is just perfectly split, perfectly timed. It's just one of the most satisfying stories in the canon of TNG. And again, if I close my eyes, I can almost put myself right there again as a young Trekker sitting down and watching this stuff for the first time. It was just incredibly explosive.
Merv?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one other thing I really enjoyed was Data getting to captain his own ship and then dealing with struggles of having a first officer who is essentially doesn't want to be there and is fighting you on everything that you're trying to do. I really thought that progressed his character quite a bit there and put him in a position that he wasn't used to being in, but I thought he thrived in that particular role and really gained some respect in it.
Thank you for mentioning it, because I actually was going to throw it to number one Data fan here, Taylor, but you stole his thunder. So, that's enough about Redemption. Let's just move on to our section called Grandmaster's Picks. And in Grandmaster's Picks, I get to decide which 3 episodes the champions absolutely need to talk about before they can talk about the episodes they want to talk about. And in this case, I cheated a little bit because I actually took 4, but 2 of them are 1. Let me explain. The first episode I chose was Darmok. The second one is Unification Part 1 and 2. And the last episode I picked was The Inner Light. Yeah, there are so many great episodes, but if you talk about great episodes in Star Trek history, at least 2 of the ones I picked are in there, aren't there, Lord Deathman?
Indeed, indeed. Where do
I'm
we
talking about
start here?
Darmok and the Inner Light, of course, but yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Okay. Again, I'm just going down this nostalgic trip with this particular season because I do feel it is one of my favorites. I know everybody says season 4 is where we get into high gear, but this is one of my all-time favorite seasons of the show. And Darmok, I think, which was episode 2 of that season, really, this is one of those episodes that really show you the high level that Star Trek can operate on because it's essentially a story about communication between 2 alien species trying to break down barriers of language, custom, tradition. That's the central conflict of this. And I always say that Star Trek is the thinking man's franchise because it offers so much in that. That there's a little bit of action and tumbling around on the ground, and they have to face off with a monster when they're on the planet. But most of this is really an alien played wonderfully by Paul Winfield, the late great Paul Winfield, who is trying to teach Picard his language, trying to establish communication, trying to overcome cultural barriers. And I think no franchise really operates on this level like Star Trek can in terms of telling stories like this. It's no wonder that it's cited as one of the best episodes in the entirety of Star Trek canon, and we have the additional benefit of having it produced many memes that are beloved in the franchise. So Cat with his eyes uncovered, yes.
Mhm.
Shaka when the walls fell, all of that good stuff.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. This is what Star Trek is for me as well. A great episode dealing with a simple thing like communication between 2 people that don't understand each other, which is awesome. Any thoughts on unification or the inner light?
absolutely, absolutely. Unification 1 and 2 very near and dear to my heart for a number of reasons. Early on in Star Trek canon, it was established that Romulans were offshoots of Vulcans, or vice versa, however you wanted to say that. At one point, they were probably one species, and then one of them became spacefaring, went to another planet, and then pursued a separate course of evolution over some specific amount of time. So I've always loved the idea that the Romulan species and the Vulcan species are cousins, if you don't exactly want to call them brothers, one of them being more warlike and secretive and xenophobic, the other having gone down a totally different path when it comes to being pacifist and tamping down their emotions and their customs based on rigid reason and logic, unlike their Romulan cousins. I've loved that. I've loved that dichotomy, and I had always secretly rooted for Romulans and Vulcans to come together, and that's exactly what Unification 2 brought to Unification Parts 1 and 2 brought to the table. The complexities of the diplomacy, all of the generational conflict that's gone on between the 2 species, the difference between them, how they handle trust, how they handle betrayal, and of course, the greatest gift that Unifications 1 and 2 brings to us is the return of Leonard Nimoy reprising his iconic role as Spock and getting up in front of that camera as if not even a second had gone by since they last rolled cameras on him. It's It's just an incredible transformation, an incredible characterization. He does amazing dramatic work in this episode. And it's one of the few story threads from Star Trek that I feel that they've carried on into the future really well. I think Discovery, which is a show that I am openly critical of, at least sort of brought us a satisfying conclusion to what happens to the Romulan and Vulcan peoples within their future. So just incredibly ambitious storytelling, though. And Mark Leonard coming back as Sarek in part one, also the chef's kiss for this two-parter. They almost got nothing wrong in this two-parter except for a few minor pacing issues. But other than that, it's one of my favorites. And then, of course, we have the Inner Light. This again, thinking man science fiction, the franchise for those who not only want the fisticuffs but come for the drama, come for the exploration of deeper issues. An alien probe causes Picard to experience an entire lifetime as a member of a long extinct civilization in just 25 minutes. You cannot get any more higher concept than that. You just can't. And you're not going to find it in any other science fiction franchise. And I defy you. I defy you to pick something out that could take a story idea like this and turn it into one of the most dramatic and memorable presentations of television that we've seen in since then and before. This goes into identity, memory, what family is like, what it's like to be a single person facing the extinction of your entire species, and they wrap that up in the few minutes that they have with the Star Trek episode. It is no wonder that this episode won science fiction television's highest honor, which was the 1993 Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. It simply is that good, and it does live up to the hype. If you haven't seen that episode, you should check it out immediately.
Yeah, I totally agree. Merv, how do you feel about these 3 episodes?
You're going to make me follow that passionate speech?
Yes, you have the fresh perspective. You can put Lord Deathman in his place. You can say, "Well, I'm sorry, but the Inner Light was just a bore, and I don't know what they were talking about at Darmok."
No. We'll start with Darmok because I think Darmok is possibly my favorite Star Trek thing to date, including movies and everything else. I can't express how much I loved that episode. Really, I just can't. I thought it was perfect. I wanted to rewatch it the second it was over. That happens very rarely with television, but that happened with that episode. The crescendo of the ending, whenever us as the viewer essentially following Picard through the entire thing, where he's piecing together parts of the language and how that all works, and we learn it with him basically, so that whenever he eventually finds his way back onto the ship and he comes in and he hails the what do they tell him?
The Tamarians.
Tamarians.
Yes.
That whole his whole conversation that they have, and the fact that we understand it, I loved it. I thought it was perfect. It was so well done that it made me emotional, and I was just like, "This is great television."
Yeah. I wish
Unification.
these guys wrote Secret Invasion or Section 31.
The guys from this episode, I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know. I'm watching it all in order, but based on everyone else's opinion, I don't know if it's up to snuff. But unification. Spock was from the original series, wasn't he?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I this is another, like, it fits that this is a two-parter. I'm actually surprised they didn't put this at the final last episode of the season.
Well, I think they dedicated this one to Gene Roddenberry, who just passed away.
Right.
That's why. and from this season onwards, they regularly made two-parters also middle of the season across the multiple series. You will experience
Oh,
this
okay.
more.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. Some you can tell, like, obviously some episodes are structured very small scale, and obviously these two-parters are on such a wide scale that there's just so much going on politically and characterly, all interwoven together. Um, Loved seeing. Obviously, there's a little bit with uh Sarek has his past with Picard, so whenever he's back in this, and obviously has another interaction with Picard, and then to see Picard with Spock, like I love that dynamic there. The way that because Picard has history with Sarek, Spock, that creates both like hurdles in their relationship, but also like smooths things out at the end, or creates like a what do you call it, like a happy ending
Valuable?
for them, I guess, like a closure, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, almost between Spock and Sarek. And then another highlight for me was Data and Spock, who are almost like weird mirror opposites because they almost want what the other one has, in as far as like Vulcan nature versus Data's android. He wants the human emotions that Spock's trying to get rid of, and Spock would love to get rid of the human emotions and become what Data is. It was just a weird, interesting dynamic from two characters that I guess kind of fill a little bit of a same like mental void in my head of like where they are on the ship as far as their role on the ship, like that logic, that kind of mindset to the captain. Um, but as far as the whole Romulan Vulcan thing, like that all worked for me. I wish I don't like Sela as much as I liked Tasha, and I think it's more just because I mean I like Tasha in season one, but Sela comes across as very one note for me, despite her lineage. So I wish there was a little bit more coming from her other than like Romulan good, yay. But other than that, like she makes an excellent villain, behind the scenes, working her, trying to be basically the puppeteers to all these, worlds, and make Romula or Romula, whatever it is, to make them
Romulus.
in control. Yeah. So that was all good. Uh, a small highlight from that really stuck out to me, it made me laugh a lot, was whenever Picard and Data are on the Klingon ship and they give them the room with the one rack, and Data's like, "Oh, you can have it because I don't need to lay down or anything anyway." And Picard tries to sleep, but he can't because Data basically just stares at him or just stares off into space or otherwise makes him like too uncomfortable to sleep. And I just thought that whole sequence was hilarious. The Inner Light, it gave me an maybe some of you guys can tell me if this is an accurate ping, but after watching it, having seen this episode after seeing The Last of Us episode 3, it almost gave me that kind of a vibe. Like, this is a full
Yes.
detour from like a normal, goings on, but it's very fulfilling in like a family way and like an emotional way. There's so much stuff happening that is just like it's right here. It's just this, it's just here. It doesn't necessarily matter to anything else, but it's all encapsulated. But it's full of everything. It's full of family, it's full of community, it's full of, it literally does feel like an entire lifetime is lived in this episode. And I do applaud it for that. I think it hit those emotional beats pretty well. I don't know if it, I found myself wondering afterward, like what the weight of that would be on me if I was Picard, like emotionally or internally. And I don't know if it factors in beyond this episode, but I thought it would come across as pretty heavy personally, like to have the weight of an entire planet essentially just dispersed on you in 25 minutes, live an
Hmm.
entire lifetime. I thought that's an interesting plot dynamic. So yeah, I liked all these episodes. I thought they were some of the best. And as far as season 5 as a whole so far, or not so far, but you know what I mean. Uh, I really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a slight dip, but I stand with Lord Deathman. I think this is a strong season, pretty start to finish for me.
Well, you get to talk about that in a little bit. But first, Taylor needs to sound off on these 3 episodes if he wants.
Absolutely. Now, Darmok is just an incredibly fun and so Trekky episode. And the performance by, I believe it was Paul Winfield, who plays Darmok, who had previously been in Wrath of Khan. His performance is just terrific in this. And the whole interaction with him and Picard on the planet, uh, facing possible death from that whatever type of monster was on the planet with them, was really just incredibly fun to watch. It was a really well done episode. Now for unification, I'll just echo what everybody has said about, it's great to see Spock and Mark Leonard again. But I want to give a little shout out. I want to take a couple of minutes just to sing the praises of the actor who played the Romulan senator in Unification. His name is Malachi Throne, and he was one of those guys that guest starred in every show in the 1960s, including he was in the original series of Star Trek. He was in the episode The Cage. He was the Commodore during Spock's trial. Previously, Gene Roddenberry had offered this guy the role of Dr. McCoy, and he had turned it down. I guess he just wanted to be guest stars in a million other shows, okay? But he was in addition to a million westerns, he was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., he was in Batman, he was in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, he was in The Time Tunnel. In The Time Tunnel, he played Machiavelli, the Machiavelli. So The Time Tunnel went really deep on history sometimes, and he got to play Machiavelli as a supervillain. Okay, all right. But last thing I want to call out on him, in addition, a couple of things I still want to say about him. But first of all, I'm not going to try and convince you all that Lost in Space was a great show. You can decide that for yourselves. But when he guest starred on Lost in Space, in the midst of all the insane zaniness going on in that show, he gave a subtle, emotional performance that was just breathtaking. He was an incredible actor. He also did a lot of voiceover work, including he did the narration for the first trailer for a little movie that came out in 1977 called Star Wars. So he had a very long and varied career, and I just thought I would give him a shout out here today. Malachi Throne. Now, as far as Inner Light goes, it's just a fascinating episode for all the reasons that Merv and Lord Deathman already said. Brilliantly written, brilliantly executed all the way through. Just great sci-fi.
Now it's time for the panel to talk about their favorite episodes, besides the ones I already took for season 5. And I'm going to start with Taylor. Taylor, your favorite episodes of season 5?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great episodes. I just wanted to point out one of them. It's called Conundrum, and it's just a really enjoyable episode for me. All right,
No.
Conundrum is an episode where some alien entity is somehow able to wipe the minds of the entire crew and give them all amnesia so they don't remember who they are. And then they plant a member of their species in the crew with them as a pretend first officer in order to trick the crew of the Enterprise into winning this planet's war for them and wiping out their enemies for them. And it's really fascinating how the characters all, track down all these different clues to find out who they really are and what their mission is and what their purpose out there in space is. And it's interesting that at first Worf thinks he's the commanding officer for a while until they find the records on the ship and find out that it's Picard. And I like how, at first they're the aliens have planted these instructions, these orders to them, and they're carrying them out, and then they're realizing something is off because this enemy that's supposed to be their deadly sworn enemy is like swatting flies, and they're like, this is too easy. There's definitely something wrong here, and I just think it's a really fun episode, just to see the characters all interact without having any knowledge of each other or themselves. So I just had a lot of fun with that episode.
Yeah. The one thing that struck me is that the moment Riker doesn't know who Ansel is he tries to well he does actually
Yeah,
you
he
know
does.
and really that man needs a leash and needs to be or put down whatever.
Yes.
Rabies. Anyway, Lord Deadman, you also had a few favorite episodes I saw on the board actually. Can you talk about one first, and then we go to Merv, and then I come back to you.
Absolutely. I will try to contain my enthusiasm, but as you guys know, it's hard for
No,
me because this is just one of my favorite seasons.
you don't need
And
to contain your enthusiasm. Just park it for a little bit, and then you can go.
Indeed. Right, I'll drop out of warp and I'll switch maneuvering thrusters. But yeah, one of my favorite episodes out of this season is one that's called Cause and Effect. And again, it's another great example of this high concept storytelling that Star Trek is just able to pull off so effortlessly. The premise of it is that the Enterprise is caught in a time loop, repeatedly colliding with another ship, the USS Bozeman, and exploding until the crew can find a way to break this cycle. So it plays out with the crew experiencing a kind of deja vu as they relive the same day over and over again. Each time, though, that day ends with the ship's destruction, kind of putting them into this weird purgatory where they just keep living the same day over and over again, kind of like a sci fi take on Groundhog's Day. But as they become aware that they're inside of this loop, they attempt to send these messages to themselves into the next iteration of the loop until, of course, Data rescues everyone and they are able to successfully transmit a number that allows them to avert disaster for the final time in the loop. But again, this storytelling, this format, the idea of repeating what was happening in the episode two or three times over with these minor changes, it had to be an incredible feat of filmmaking, just from a technical perspective, doing this like three takes on the same thing with minor changes as they become more and more aware of the fact that they're in this time paradox. There's the classic sort of Star Trek problem solving under pressure. They have to work as a team to figure things out. They have to trust in their leadership in terms of how to get out of this particular sci-fi prison that they're in. It's no surprise that this episode also won a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation in 1993, as well as The Inner Light. So again, just operating on all cylinders here in this particular season, and I think this is a great example of what Star Trek can do at a high level.
Yeah, and cause and effect is definite proof that Cheers, the show, was nothing but a holodeck program.
Indeed, indeed. We do get we get a cameo. I don't know if it's actually a cameo. I'm gonna let Taylor keep me honest on this one. From Kelsey Grammer, who plays the captain of the Bozeman at the end. And yeah, so maybe Norm was off to the side in terms of being at the bar. Norm.
No,
But
I believe the actor that played Norm also played Morn. But and
that's
now,
for another episode.
yes,
Yeah, but it was great to see Kelsey in that cameo. I believe he is a Star Trek fan, and I'm glad he inserted himself into the fandom in some way.
yeah, yeah. Morn is actually named after Norm from Cheers. But and Merv is now who is Morn? You will get to know him at Deep Space Nine. Merv, you also have a favorite episode for season 5.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite's probably Darmok, but coming in at a close second or third is the game, which it just rings straight out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers to me. Down to like young romantic leads having to fight against this essentially mind corrupting influence as it takes everything over around them. I just love it. It's the kind of story beats that I'm a big fan of. Like I'm a big fan of horror movies. You guys know that. So it's not that it's particularly scary, although there are several sinister moments where, especially like whenever they take Data out, whenever the influenced Dr. Crusher kind of not dismantles, but takes Data out of the picture because he's probably the only one that can't be corrupted by this video game turned weaponized product from some alien race. I can't recall which one it is, but
The Katarians.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just loved it. This is I think it's the second and maybe only the amount of episodes that has a young Ashley Judd as Robin Leffler. She was in the Darmok episode. I remembered seeing her and being like, "Is that Ashley Judd?" And then, obviously in this episode, she gets a lot more love as the Robin character when she gets a love interest in Wesley. And you guys know I'm a big fan of Wesley, so whenever he shows up, I tend to pay closer attention. But it was just an easy to like episode for me with the whole, kind of the everyone in the crew is systematically being corrupted by this thing, and then our young romantic leads have to try to figure out how to stop it. And then, of course, it's Data who saves the day, really, for everyone. But Wesley too. So
Mhm.
yeah, I really like that episode.
Yeah, and I'm sure young Ashley Judd had nothing to do with the fact that you paid more attention to this episode.
Hey, it was easy.
Yeah. Easy on the eyes. Lord Heathman, like I said, now I let you indulge yourself. Go
Indeed,
ahead.
indeed. Look, I had two more episodes that I just wanted to call a little bit of attention to. One of them, I would say this one's a fan favorite, but it is called The First Duty, episode 19 of season 5. And this is the one where Wesley Crusher and Nova Squadron, his teammates at Starfleet Academy, they're involved in a fatal accident. And that leads to an investigation and it tests Wesley's integrity. So this was a totally different pivot, a totally different take on the Wesley character who up until that point had been the sort of young genius that never gets it wrong and is always managing to insinuate himself into adult affairs in very awkward ways. But here we got to see him, as a young man. He's about to enter manhood, and his time at the academy doesn't go the way anyone would have expected. You know, the training accident that Nova Squadron is involved in does result in the death of a cadet. And his teammates are caught in a cover-up. That this is an ethics violation. It's an honor code violation, and Wesley has to struggle between his loyalties to his squad and his duty to the truth. And Captain Picard turns out to be an excellent mentor, if one who isn't willing to coddle him and really tell him, look, there's a moral sort of obligation that you have to the truth here and to being honest and integrity, being honest and having integrity. So it is one of my favorite episodes, even though it tends to be a little bit downbeat and it leaves Wesley Crusher's fate somewhat in question. The next episode, ironically, is called The Next Phase. It is episode 24. It's pretty close to the end of the season. Just when you think, they might not have any more surprises for you, again, we get one of these delicious, high concept episodes. This one focusing on Geordi and Ensign Rowe, Michelle Forbes, who recently joined the show. They become phased due to an experimental Romulan technology, and they're both believed to be dead by the crew of the Enterprise and by the crew of a Romulan ship that are engaged in a bit of a struggle within the episode. And while they're out of phase in the episode, they're not being seen by anyone. They seem to be dead, and no one can perceive them, and they're invisible. And that gets into an interesting debate between the two characters around spirituality, the afterlife. I thought also that LeVar Burton and Michelle Forbes had great chemistry as this kind of odd couple who have to work together to solve the mystery of how they've become untethered from normal reality and perception. And they have to, step by step, put together mystery to uncover what happened to them. Ensign Ro being Bajoran, she puts her trust and faith in her spirituality and the prophets, and then LaForge, being much more of an advocate of science and reason, doesn't want to believe that he is dead. And he is looking for the scientific explanation for what's happening with them. And again, I think it's a very clever, high concept idea that Star Trek uses to bring us into some deeper issues to help us explore issues of spirituality versus your faith in science and reason.
Yeah, absolutely great episodes. Yeah, great picks, everybody. Great picks. That will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, help us out. Like and share this review and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really want more of us, join us at cigar.freeforms.net. We would love it if you do that. Our next episode of the Star Trek Project will be about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 6. Next week, we will start our review series for Daredevil Born Again. But for now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of our champions, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye. So, Section 31. Taylor, you saw it?
I did.
You liked it?
No.
Lord did you like it?
Absolutely not.
So, I guess we don't need to review it, just flush it.
Here's what I'm going to say about Section 31. Section 31 is a pilot for a TV series made as a Star Wars knockoff in 1980 and wasn't good enough to be picked up by any network or even to be put into syndication in the 1980s. It's that bad.
Okay. Yeah, people, we promised a full review for Section 31, but we're going to keep it after we slept on it for a few years. Maybe it will get better in time. You never know. Lord Deathman, you want to say anything about this?
Beyond that, it proves that my beloved franchise really needs help behind the scenes, and I'm hoping that this failure, this abject failure, is enough to prompt some of the leadership to start thinking about making changes.
Kurtzman, be gone.